This is the Extra Point Podcast. During this podcast, we will dive deeper into our Sunday teaching and share practical next steps for your faith journey. Now, let's kick off the Extra Point.
Hey, welcome to the Extra Point. I'm Cheryl Ross, the Next Steps in Discipleship pastor here at Southridge Church, and I'm with Scott Beha, our lead pastor. Getting ready to dive deeper into another week of our Rise and Fall series where we've been walking through the book of 1 Samuel. But before we go any further, make sure that you like and subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already done so. That way you don't miss out on any new content. So this week, Pastor Scott, you dove into chapter 27 of 1 Samuel. And your main idea of this was not to grow tired of doing the right things just because the enemy won't stop attacking.
Yeah.
Now, I know that, like, the enemy and spiritual warfare and those kind of things are something that, like, a lot of people don't know much about, or sometimes it scares them, or, is talked about in different kind of not the right way. So explain to us exactly what you mean by that and kind of elaborate a little bit more about spiritual warfare and the attacks of the enemy and what that can look like practically.
Yeah. So I will preface this because I was talking to someone about this weekend. Mm-hmm. I think there is a subsection of Christianity that has so overly spiritualized everything that it's like the devil's behind every corner, and I think that's a really unhealthy way of. It's like, oh man, there was this morning I got stuck by a train, and I've never actually seen this happen before. Someone else may say that this is a regular occurrence, but I got stuck by a train, first and foremost, because it was totally my fault. I was on my cell phone and forgot to start driving, so I held up the whole line, and everyone was mad at me. But the first train goes by, so I put it in drive because I'm ready to go, and then without a second train came, and I was like, oh my goodness. Now there is a certain subsection of Christianity that would so spiritualize that they'd be like, either now you're going to be late for work, that's the devil, he's trying to get you off your game on Monday, or they would say something like, you were going to get into a car wreck, that's why he sent the other train. I go, can we stop being so weird all the time? Like, is that possible to just not be a weird Christian? I say that at the same time going, it is also possible that, yes, both of those things are true.
Yeah.
But it's also possible that neither of those things are true. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to explain this to someone this weekend. They were telling me about something going on. I was like, I mean, yeah, maybe, but it could also be this or that. Like, can we just, like, it doesn't, like, we don't have to take the weirdest possible result or answer every time that it's presented to us. We we're not contractually obligated to that.
Right.
But I just want to say that off the bat. Like, sometimes it's spiritual warfare. Other times, we just live in a world where people make free choices and crap happens. Like, that's just what it is. And it can be either one of those. I think for me, whenever I think about spiritual warfare, I think more of like, man, there's some things that I can't explain that take place, and I go, oh, I wonder why that is, and then the timing of it. But even that, I would go, but let's make sure that we're not giving the devil too much credit, because I think that's what too many Christians do. They give the devil too much credit, and it's like, no, listen, somebody was just mean to you. That was like Satan didn't enter into that person and make them be mean to you. That maybe that person is just mean. So I think that we just have to temper the conversation about spiritual warfare, even though I think that it's like 100%.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. I would think of it more in the terms of how, like, C.S. Lewis talks about spiritual warfare in, like, the Screw Tape Letters. Like, I think sometimes what's happening behind the scene is trying to evoke certain reactions in us to get us to do and say and think things that we ought not to do, think, or say. More so than, like, oh, the front door handle was wiggling.
Yeah.
It's like, can we chill out on that?
Yeah, I think having Aaliyah get up and share some of her story, I think, was really cool, because I think that gives some real practicality of what it can look like. Those thoughts of, well, I'm not good enough to do this. I can't do this. There's no way, whatever. This isn't going to make a difference, so I'm not going to give anyway. I think it's things like that that's like, those thoughts that, well, God tells you to give, so
Yes.
why don't you just listen to him instead of what you're thinking
Yeah.
about it? Or God's told you to come and do this, so think those thoughts rather than, well, I'm not good enough. Well, why would God tell you to come and do that? Like,
Yeah.
those
Somebody
types of-
shared yesterday, they were like, every time that in any church that they've ever been in, every time someone gets up to preach, they get hyper distracted. They can't figure out why, but like they get tired and they get distracted. And they're like, "Can you pray for that?" I said, "Absolutely, we can pray for that because that may be some sort of spiritual warfare trying to pull your attention away.
Yeah.
It may also be that you just didn't sleep good the night before.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just how I approach all of this. I go, it could be, but it could also be this.
Yes.
So we're going to prepare for both of them. We're going to get more sleep, and we're going to pray that God will not distract us because it could be, we don't know what it is. I think spiritual warfare is real. There is the point of this sermon is you definitely have an enemy that in John 10:10 it says that he came to steal, kill, and destroy.
Right.
That is what he is all about. Like 1 Peter, there's a roaring lion seeking to devour you.
Yeah.
And so, do I think that Satan can give you cancer? No, he does not have that. Like if you go and look at the story of Job in the Old Testament, whenever the enemy is allowed to attack, it's only with permission from God and under the parameters of God. So there are always limits on what the enemy can do and things like that. So he's just not running roughshod, just doing whatever he wants either. But sometimes God will allow attack and difficulty to come our way because it's good for us, because it's going to develop something in us. And so I think of that, like you just go, remember there's parameters to it, like so it's not like God's not, or like Satan's not making you sick.
Right.
Satan didn't burn your house down. You left the crock pot on. Like I do think that the vast majority of spiritual warfare is right between our ears, right? What Aaliyah was talking about, like you'll get these thoughts or these feelings where you go, oh, or like for me this weekend, Megan and I ended up in a little bit of disagreement. And it had already been a really rough week. And I was like, and we ended up in this for no reason really on either of our sides. Like it was just silliness. But what happened was, I believe the enemy set a trap to where he goes, I'm going to see if they'll fall into it. And we definitely did. And that's what he does a lot of times. Like he'll set a trap for you at work where you're like, I will set up a situation where you're going to be irritated by the person sitting next to you, and I'm going to see if you'll lose your temper on them. Like that's what I think. I think sometimes we try to be really weird when we don't need to be, but I do think we need to be very mindful that you have an enemy that absolutely hates you and wants to see your demise and will attack any possible way that he is allowed to or permitted to derail you off of the course that God has for your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you said the enemy doesn't attack inconsequential targets, and you talked about how, like, if you're not experiencing any kind of thing, then maybe, like, you're not heading in the right direction. How do we really feel, like, how do we know for sure one way or another? Because I think we do have those moments of goodness in our lives, but I also think that sometimes it's kind of how we decide to believe and perceive life. Because I think if we're the type that kind of over-spiritualizes everything and thinks everything is an attack from the enemy, we'll probably always feel like life isn't good.
Yeah.
But if we can remember the blessings even in the midst of the attack, then maybe we'll still see life as good even in those moments. But so how do we know, like, what the difference is and kind of setting ourselves up to, like, really realize if we're headed in the right direction or not and those kind of things?
Yeah, I would say just one of the things I want to make sure that we drove home was you're not in the middle of a storm because you're necessarily doing the wrong things. I also want to make sure that it's clear. You might be in the middle of the storm because you're doing something wrong.
Right.
If you are in financial trouble because you don't stop using credit cards, that's not spiritual warfare. That's stupidity. Like it's just outright stupidity. That's not spiritual warfare whatsoever. That's not, man, God's really testing me. It's like, no, you have no discipline in your finances. So I want to make sure, but a lot of times you will end up in the middle of a battle or a storm simply by following Jesus. You know, you're not, if you're in an interpersonal conflict with someone because you're a really difficult person, that's not spiritual warfare. That's you being a very difficult person. But if you like can take the posture that David is able to take throughout this whole story, you did nothing wrong. Every chance that you had to settle the score, you didn't. There's probably no one that can really take that posture in most situations. But if you could, then you could go, okay, this is definitely some sort of spiritual attack that I'm now in conflict with my brother or my sister or something's going on with no fault of my own whatsoever. That maybe they have leaned into the lies that the devil has told them, and now they're coming against me for that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to say that you were innocent in the situation to be able to take that, because I also don't want, like, I think there was probably some people going, man, this is exactly what I needed to hear, all the while they were the master of their own mess.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not talking about that.
Right.
There's still hope for you if you're the master of your own mess, and God can clean that up, but, like, that's not really what we're talking about either. I just want people to not assume that they're on the wrong path just because it's not smooth sailing.
Right.
Because it was never promised. And that you very well, just like I told the story from the disciples, they get into the boat, they get into the middle of the ocean or into the middle of the lake, and it's like, clearly Jesus knew that storm was coming. He was totally okay with them going into it because it was going to be something that was going to help build their faith.
Yeah.
They ended up in the middle of the storm because they were being obedient, right? So you might be obedient to the Lord and end up in the middle of a storm, and you go, all right, well, I'll take that storm because I'm right where I'm supposed to be. That storm I can now see is good for me. It's for my perseverance. It's for the development of character or whatever it is, and I'll receive that storm. So I think that's how you kind of what you need to work through is, let's make sure that you're not the one causing the storm through your own actions or decisions. And if you end up in the storm because you're being faithful to the Lord, you know, like if you say something really ignorant on Facebook and you end up with 100 comments that are telling you what a horrible person you're like, and you're like, man, I was just speaking the truth. I was just speaking for the Lord. No, you were being an idiot. And now people are coming against you, and that's not spiritual attack. You created that. But, like for me, whenever I'm preaching, like, I don't even care to share this, to be honest, because it's probably true of a bunch of people. People did not like my Easter sermon, which is like the most critical sermon of the year you could argue for. People did not like it this last year. Someone told me, my family's having trouble coming back because of that sermon. That is, I don't mind that whatsoever. And here's why. If I'm being faithful to do what the Lord has asked me to do, and I'm not, we can disagree or whatever on whether or not I handled that sermon in the most loving way possible. I could say there was no malice behind it or anything. Then at the end of the day, I can live with that and go, yeah, that's fine. I don't feel, I feel like I was faithful to the Lord, and still I loved people enough to try to give them truth and love, and I hope I did that to the best of my ability. But I can walk away from that and go, all right, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel. I was just being faithful to the Lord in that. But, like, if I was just being intentionally crass and intentionally, like, damaging to people, I wouldn't be able to take that posture. Then I would be like, nah, man, I actually created this mess, and it's kind of my fault.
Right.
But I don't want that to be, that will sometimes be the case. I mean, we're all going to screw it up eventually. You just don't want that to be the case all the time, and then cry spiritual warfare whenever you upset people and they attack back.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the points that I think I even had told you this in the early feedback before Sunday that I thought was like such a great point was about how if you don't drive out the enemy, then he's going to be your neighbor for life.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is such a critical piece, because I think that a lot of people want to change and want to see good for their life, but then they won't make that like final choice that really removes it completely.
Yeah.
So what does this look like practically for us to really fully drive out an enemy so that it's not there for life?
Yeah, so like what happens, I think, to a lot of people is that we try to get our issues to a manageable level rather than to a non-existent level. right? Like, so if you have an issue with alcohol, you'll try to get it to a manageable. It's like, okay, well, now I'm only doing it on Fridays and Saturdays, so it's not affecting my work anymore. You go, yeah, and you are going to live with that the rest of your life if you don't fully drive it out. If you're someone that struggles with that, or if it's like if finances is your issue, and you're like, well, I don't spend as much as I used to.
Right.
Let's go. Well, so what? You have it at a manageable level, or you fully drove out that issue of materialism or whatever it is that's causing you to be in financial duress. Like what the goal was not to just get it manageable. That was Israel's problem. Israel got into the promised land. They got mostly into it. They got it to a manageable, like, yeah, this is clearly the promised land. But then they just let really tough situations just linger around and didn't drive them out. And then, like, all throughout the rest of Israel's history, here you are fighting with these people every daggone chapter of the Old Testament because you didn't get rid of them when the Lord told you to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Right? So if you just keep dabbling around with it, like going back to it every once in a while, playing games with it, that will be your issue for the rest of your life. And the crazy thing is, it doesn't have to be.
Right.
There actually is freedom from these things in Christ.
Yeah.
Like I think some of us would go, well, I'm just going to struggle with this my whole life. No, I Lord knows, like, if you could see my prayer journals, I am constantly asking God, I want this to be, I don't want to manage this thing. I don't want to be like, man, well, at least I only struggle with it from time to time. Like, no, like, that's cool that I only struggle with it from time to time based on where I started. I want it completely eradicated.
Yeah.
I don't want this to be true of me in 10 years and 20 years and 30 years. And I think there's so many people that are like, well, it's so much better. Like when I first started following Jesus, I was doing this, 3 times a day. And now I'm only doing it 3 times a month. Praise God. You're not who you used to be. But let me tell you, you are also not who you will be in the future if you will stay the course of faithfulness and really try to drive that thing out, because you do not have to live with it the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I used to think that about my anxiety, that, well, this is just how I'm going to be for the rest of my life. And even though it's not eradicated, the fight to fully get it eradicated has not stopped. Just because it's at a manageable level, just because I'm now a functioning adult, does not mean I can just go, all right, but I'll just suffer with it every once in a while. It's like, no, I'm still going to counseling. I'm still trying to do everything I possibly can to drive this out. That way, I pray that there will be, and hope that there will be some time in the future where I'll be completely free of it. I don't want it to be manageable. I don't want whatever I struggle with to just be manageable. I want it to be gone. I want what the New Testament says about being a new creation. I want that to be true of me. And so we can't just get our issues down to a manageable level and go, well, that's good enough. I'm not who I used to be. Praise God. And that's where we stop. It's like, no. And then once you drive one enemy out, it's like the spiritual life seems like it's like a spiritual whack-a-mole game. As soon as you drive one enemy out, another one will pop up. And you'll go, well, gosh, I didn't even know I had issues with that. It's like, yeah, you did. It was there all along, but we were working on this. And the Lord's like, all right, we got this taken care of. Now this. And you'll notice that that's the discipleship process. It will always be something until there's nothing else left for you to fight, which doesn't happen until the end of your life. So yeah, if you want to keep making compromises, like, oh, I'll just do it on the weekends, or whatever it is, that's going to be your issue for life. I know, like, a lot of people that struggle with lust and sexual issues of different kinds, they're like, oh, marriage will fix that. He goes, no. If that's your issue before you're married, being married will not fix that issue. It just won't.
Yeah. You
think it will. That will actually end up being your issue for the rest of your life. Which is why, when I talk to people, and this is just like the normal thing now. Like, everyone just lives together. Everyone's just kicking the tires before they buy the car. That's just that's what we've said that we do in our society. And I go, all the studies bear out that that's not working. It's not the proper way whatsoever. But like, if you can't control yourself before marriage, you don't stand a lot of chance of controlling yourself. Like, whatever it is that's missing in your life that's leading to that behavior before marriage, it will still be missing and still be an issue after you're married. It might just move into different areas of brokenness. Yeah. And so That's why it's like, oh, yeah, we're doing that now. But don't worry, we're going to get married. You go, great. But that doesn't solve the fact that you're just okay
Right.
with disobedience in one season
Yeah.
because you'll be obedient in that one area. No, if you're okay with disobedience in one season, you'll be okay with disobedience in the future, but it'll just change. Well, now we're married, but now I'm disobedient over here. It just doesn't. If you're serious about transformation, you have to drive the enemy out and not give him the slightest foothold in your life, or else he will take more. Like you give him an inch, he's taking a mile every time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good stuff. I think one last point that I think is critical to remember is that we will not stop doing good even though the enemy keeps coming.
Yeah.
You've shared what the enemy's main purpose and goal is to continue to attack, continue to come. And it's easy to, like, it would be easy to say, I'm done with it, right? And quit. Like, quitting would seem easy. But it's really not going to be easy if you quit, because there will still be an enemy there. There will still be things that go on in your life. I think of Nehemiah, even when they're building the wall, right? And the enemy comes like, come down here and fight. And Nehemiah's like, I'm doing a good thing. I am not coming down to you.
Yeah.
And I think we have to have that kind of attitude in this life, in our faith journey, right? To say like, no, I'm doing a good thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come down there and fight. Like, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to stop what I'm
Yeah.
doing just because you're coming and yelling at me or doing whatever. How can we, like, is there something practically that we can do to help us to continue to stay encouraged in those moments when that happens, when that comes, so that we don't give up, so that we don't quit?
Yeah, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, but I will tell you one of the things, and I had to do this a lot last week, that whenever you do find yourself coming up against somebody or something, the first thing that you need to do, long before you ever try to defend yourself, and this is everyone's first thing that they want to do is defend themselves in the situation, is ask, is there anything that I can learn from this situation? Before I say they're off base, they don't know what they're talking about, I didn't do anything, or whatever it is. Before, or you go, man, look at this mess that we're in, I didn't do anything. Before you try to defend yourself, ask yourself, what is there anything, even if it's one thing that you can learn from what is happening, you will end up better off on the other side of it. If you go straight to defensiveness and go, like I told you on our meeting this morning, there's a situation with a family in our church, and I take full blame for it. I go, I don't think that I took care of them the way that I should have. And I could have probably given 1,000 reasons why that took place. And I'm probably, at the end of the day, not 100% responsible, but I will take 100% of the responsibility because I want to learn from that to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not perfect at doing that, but I promise if you will look to take responsibility before defending yourself, you will become the type of person that can continue on.
Yeah.
And you go, look, I screwed that up. Or, yep, the enemy does keep coming after me, but I'm going to keep on the path because I'm learning and growing with God's grace and His mercy. Yeah. And that's what life, like that's how you get better at life. Is just don't try to defend yourself all the time. Like if someone like critiques you on something, go, I'm gonna take, even if it's totally off base, I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna try to be better. Yeah. That's what I'm gonna do because I don't have to stoop down to your level. I don't have to fight you or anything like that. Like I'll let God take care of all of that. I'll learn what I can learn and try to be better in the future. And that's how you just keep moving on. Because if not, you'll either defend yourself and you'll learn nothing, and then you'll just continue to make the same mistakes over and over and over and over, which that's not a good option. Or you'll get so stuck in the mud of what you did and how bad you are and all that that you'll just end up wanting to give up.
Yeah.
No, just find out if you can learn something, learn the lesson, be better in the future. Yeah. And even though the enemy just keeps coming over and over and over and over and over, go, okay, what is it that God's trying to do through this that I can learn and grow, and then keep moving on. Keep your head up, keep moving on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good stuff. Hey, don't quit, don't give up, keep the course, keep being faithful, no matter what the enemy throws at you. And we can't wait to see how God is going to move and work through you. We will be right back here again next week for another deep dive into our Sunday teaching through the Extra Point. We hope to see you then.
Thanks for tuning in to The Extra Point. Be sure to subscribe to the Southridge Church podcast and tune in every Wednesday for another episode of The Extra Point.